You gonna turn on the light? Well, hello and welcome to Merrimack Community Television. My name is Ray Chadwick. I'm chairman of the Hillsborough County Republican Committee. Our committee exists to promote the Republican platform and candidates and to help inform the voters. This program today is a panel discussion with the Republican candidates for New Hampshire Senate District 11, and this is our chance to present them to the voters and have the voters see what they stand for and help make an informed choice. Now, District 11 of the New Hampshire State Senate comprises the towns of Amherst, Merrimack, Milford, and Wilton. Our representative, our senator in District 11 for the last 5 terms has been State Senator Peter Bragdon. Peter has chosen not to run again, and we have 4 excellent Republican candidates who will be vying in the primary on September 9th for the opportunity to represent the citizens of District 11. Our panel discussion today is going to give those folks a chance to answer some questions about New Hampshire and the issues of interest to its citizens. Helping us today in this discussion, I will be the moderator, and we have 4 panelists. First, on my left, the viewer's right, is Chris Buda. Chris is the chairman of the Merrimack Town Republican Committee, and Chris is the prime architect of this panel discussion and the arrangements behind it. We want to thank the town of Merrimack for allowing us to use its facilities here at the Town Council meeting room, and also the folks at Merrimack Community Television for their support in this activity. Sitting next to Chris is Andy Seal. Andy is the chairman of the Milford Republican Committee. Sitting next to him is Frank Edelblut, and Frank is the chairman of the Wilton Town Committee. Frank is also a candidate for the New Hampshire House to represent District 38. And last, at the end of the table, is Mark Vincent. Mark is the chairman of the Amherst Republican Committee. He is also the Area 3 vice chairman for the New Hampshire State Committee. All of these gentlemen, as am I, are members of the New Hampshire Republican State Committee, and also the positions they have as committee chairs oblige them all to be neutral in any primary contest. So their questions will be neutral and focused on the issues of concern to the members of their committees. Now, today we have the 4 candidates with us. I was about to say contestants, but I'm thinking better of it. And we have earlier drawn cards to see who will first get to present themselves. We'll have opening statements in this discussion. Each of the candidates will in turn present about a 2-minute opening statement, what they want the voters to remember them for. Once that's over, then we'll go to panel discussions, starting first with Chris Buda on my left. So, in the order in which we drew cards, the first one to present is Dan Dwyer. Dan, would you please tell the voters what you want to tell them about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, Ray, and everybody for putting this on, particularly Chris Buda. I believe, I'm not sure if you were the brainchild, to not take away from the rest of your colleagues over there, but all 4 of you.
The chief brainchild.
The chief brainchild, putting together this forum for everybody. Obviously, the people in Merrimack know who I am because you see me on Thursday nights, but I'm hoping to get out of this is that the other towns have an opportunity to see us as well. Again, my name is Dan Dwyer. I am from Merrimack, running for District 11. I'm a lifelong resident of New Hampshire. I've been here since I was born in 1963 in the city of Manchester. One of the reasons why I'm here today and why I've been running for local office 5 years ago when I took a seat on the town council was a sense of frustration of what's been happening to our state in our local matters is what got me started to begin with. My background, I've been married for 27 years come August with 3 children. I'm a small business owner. I've been in the sales and marketing field. I was a state rep when I was in my early 20s from Manchester, I'll bet as a Democrat, but I've been now a Republican ever since Ronald Reagan being my first president. I kind of mention that because I'm proud of my roots as that Reagan Democrat who took millions of Democrats and changed us over to Republicans, and I've never looked back. So I have very strong feelings about the Republican Party because I've been active since I've been a teenager in that field. Timing is everything. If you want to hear more about me, because it's an intro and I only have 2 minutes, timing is everything. One of my main things is stop the madness of what's going on in Concord, and I couldn't have asked for a better headline in today's Union Leader, and that's the only reason why I'm showing it today. The headline reads, New Hampshire worker health costs top in the U.S. We top the U.S. Let me do it one more time. New Hampshire worker health costs top U.S. list. This is what's happened in our state. Insurance is killing us. It's one of my prime reasons. We've had over a decade of well over 20 insurance companies leaving New Hampshire. We are now left with one company. Every town and city is beholden to one company to buy its workman's compensation for all employees, state and local levels. It's one of the main issues that we have to tackle, and that is one of the main platforms I am talking about if I was to be chosen to be senator, is to tackle the gross injustice of what's happening in our insurance industry here up in Concord. Thank you. Thank you, and for the record, 2 minutes is too short. I would like to change the rules and go to 3. I would like my colleagues to have 3 minutes if it's okay with you. But thank you.
You had 2 minutes.
It went by too fast.
Next is Gary Daniels.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Daniels. I live in Milford. I'm currently serving in my 18th year in the New Hampshire House. I've been on the Labor Committee all that time. For the last 2 years, I have represented Hollis, Milford, Mount Vernon, and New Boston. Prior to that, 6 years, I represented Milford and Amherst, and for 10 years, I represented Milford alone. As a state representative, I've sponsored numerous bills in pursuit of advancing freedom and economic prosperity in New Hampshire, including a right-to-work bill, a bill that protects you from identity theft by prohibiting the use of your Social Security numbers, private property protection acts to protect the federal government or the state government from taking away your private property. I sponsored also a Lyme legislation bill that enabled chronic Lyme disease victims to get the long-term antibiotic care that they need here in New Hampshire rather than going out of state. I'm a strong advocate for limited government, free enterprise, and states' rights. The Constitution is my political Bible. The Bible is my moral compass. The party platform mirrors my beliefs. And I have a 99.1 rating with the House Republican Alliance, which tracks those constitutional and platform issues. I'm also currently serving in my 12th year on the Milford Board of Selectmen. I served 6 years on the school board prior to that, and 6 years as school district moderator. And this local government level experience has greatly enhanced my ability to see how state legislation affects the local communities, and that has been a great asset in returning to the House. I take a personal interest in the towns I represent. I'm looking forward to meeting you over the coming weeks, and I want to be your senator and look forward to working with you and ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Maureen, please.
Thank you, Ray, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for watching. My name is Maureen Mooney, and I'm a candidate for the State Senate here in District 11. My website is votemooney.com. I've lived in Merrimack for over 20 years, and during that time, I've worked tirelessly to elect Republican candidates and promote Republican principles and its platform, both on the state level, on the local level, and at the State House. As chairman of the Platform Committee for the entire state, Ovid Lamontagne and I traveled to every county in order to take in information from Republicans and draft what is currently our party's platform in our state. And it really warms my heart to hear so many candidates refer to that platform and the work that we did. On the local level, I chaired the Merrimack Republican Town Committee. I worked tirelessly there to raise money, help candidates, especially to the New Hampshire House, in order to ensure a Republican majority in our delegation and in our state. I served 3 terms in the New Hampshire House of Representatives and rose through the ranks of leadership very quickly. I was an assistant Republican leader. I served on the Rules Committee. I chaired the Special Committee on Eminent Domain, when the Kelo decision was rendered by the U.S. Supreme Court that threatened private property rights. I earned a reputation of being a dedicated, committed, hardworking, and experienced leader for this district. I take constituent service very seriously, and I hope to earn your vote on September 9th for the State Senate in order to continue my work in District 11. Thank you again.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan?
Thank you for having me. My name is Dan Hines. I'm running for Senate, and I'm a small business owner looking for a smaller government. The reason I decided to run is I was disappointed with some of the Republican votes last term in the Senate. I'm opposed to tax increases. I think that goes against the Republican platform, and I'd like to see some decrease in taxes and overall a smaller government. If elected, my priorities will be education, the economy, healthcare, and obviously a smaller government. I think many of those things work together. It's what Republicans stand for, and I hope to earn your support in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. You beat your 2-minute target very handily there. Okay, what we propose here, we're going to offer questions. Each of these gentlemen on my left, the panelists from their town committees, will offer questions to the candidates, and we will start first on my left, first on my right. Each candidate will have the chance to answer the same question. Then we'll move on to the next panelist. So, Chris Buda, you're first. Can you have your question,
Yes.
sir?
Thanks a lot, Ray. All right. What is the best way for the legislature to make New Hampshire an attractive state to do business in?
The best way is to create a pro-economic growth policies that will attract those businesses to New Hampshire. In my 18 years on the Labor Committee, it seems like we have done everything we can, particularly in the last 8 years, with the exception of a couple last term, to push companies out of New Hampshire, and consequently they're going to places like Texas, the Carolinas. We need to put those policies in place to say that New Hampshire is open for business, that we are willing to put economic-minded legislators in the State House who will protect the businesses, not harm them, but be able to put in place those policies that are going to allow businesses to have the freedom to succeed, to have that potential that they're looking for when they started their business.
Thank you. Dan?
I have a little bit of a different approach because I feel that it's gone on too far under the current circumstances. So if having a policy or a think tank would not be my approach. My approach would be tackling 3 or 4 major issues. Number one, insurance. Instead of having a policy study group, it should just be said like a plain common folk, which is what I am, in a black and white world, which is what I see and live in. Several years ago, over a decade ago, Gene Shaheen and the Democrats changed our insurance world here in New Hampshire. As you all know, it sounds like a broken record, but we had over 25 insurance companies. Today, we only have 1. If the House is taken by the Republicans, we must, from day one, write legislation that brings back companies. If they could write legislation that can get rid of 20 in a few years, then we should be able to write legislation that brings 20 back in. Number 2, the next thing is our college education program. Again, through the newspaper, I'm just read the news like everybody else, and it infuriates me over the weekend where UNH, but it's already happened, so this is why the madness factor comes in. UNH has already passed their $60 million fundraising campaign to redo Cowell Stadium. $60 million. We have the highest tuition at $27,000 a year in New Hampshire. It was wrong to spend $60 million to, quote, put people in this tailgating section and fancy up the parking lots so they could get tailgaters to come in, but, quote, we want to make sure that they're 21-year-olds so they can drink. You can't make this stuff up. This is the mindset of the trustees and people up in Concord who approved $60 million to our university system so they could get more people to go watch football games because they're all disappointed because not enough kids are going to see football games. But since you're 18 when you graduate high school and you don't tend to be 21 or 22 until you graduate college, I don't know what tailgater segment of people. But this is the line of thinking, and since I'm short for time, I'm going to let you just carry on that idea. The third idea is EBT cards. After the old woman in the convenience store got fired, nothing has changed. EBT card is rampant with fraud, rampant. They trade them like baseball cards out on the street, and that has to stop. So those are 3 areas. I could go on about more, but the things that we do to ourselves just don't make, the common sense is gone, and we need to fix that. And that's what I would bring up to Concord. I would be able to talk plainly and bring common sense conversations and get common sense solutions to the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you. There are multiple things that we need to do in order to attract business to New Hampshire. One of which is pass a right-to-work law in New Hampshire, and that is the freedom to choose whether or not to join a union. We're the only state, or we are of a state, from about Washington, D.C. north that does not have this law. But several states in the south and to the west do, and they are magnets to large industry and small industry alike. My first term in the New Hampshire House, I sponsored that bill, the right-to-work bill. Very contentious, takes some courage to do that, but I was the prime sponsor in order to get that law here. I believe that if New Hampshire were the only state in the Northeast that had that law, we too would become a magnet in the Northeast to big industry and small businesses alike. In addition to the right-to-work law, I believe that we need to get a handle on regulations that are choking our businesses. When Bill O'Brien was the Speaker of the House, he had a special committee designed solely to study regulations that are imposed on our businesses in New Hampshire. During the time he was Speaker, they were able to repeal, I think the number was 84, but I've been told by members of his leadership team that was just the tip of the iceberg. In the New Hampshire State Senate, I hope to bring back a committee just like that and start reviewing these statutes from A to Z in order to see what can be done with regards to not only over-regulation, but over-licensing as well. On a final note, I don't know how much time I have, but just recently Georgia was named one of the top states in the country to do business in. And the reason why it was named that were because of various categories that it did well in. Infrastructure, the health of its citizens, right to work state, all sorts of things. And those categories need to be closely examined as well in order to make our state very competitive in a business-free enterprise market. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. And Dan?
Thank you. The number one thing I would do to bring businesses into New Hampshire is lower the business profit tax. Right now, it's hovering around 10%. That's twice as high as Massachusetts. That's unacceptable. When I tell that to people, they just don't believe it. It's just out of hand. If we lower that tax, it will bring businesses from Massachusetts back to New Hampshire instead of the other way around. We're frankly losing business to different states because our tax is too high. The business profit tax is a fancy way of saying it's an income tax on small business owners. And when I tell people New Hampshire has an income tax for certain people, that's exactly what it is. It's an income tax. Most people I speak to are opposed to an income tax. I think even the Democrats are opposed to income tax. We should all be opposed to income tax. We need to lower the business profit tax. Right to work, I also support. I think that's a great way to get companies back into New Hampshire, and it's going to increase wages. Increased wages will obviously keep people in New Hampshire. We need to be able to pay our employees enough. I don't think a minimum wage increase is the right way to do that. I think businesses having more profit, they're going to, supply and demand in the free market dictates that they pay their employees more. I think that's what we need. I think property tax has gotten out of control. It's too high. People can't live here anymore. They're retiring. They've owned their house. They lived here 60 years. And if they're on Social Security, Medicare, it's oftentimes $1,000 around that a month, and their property tax is cutting half of that. That's just, it's unsustainable. We need to look at lower taxes. I think that's the best way to draw business in New Hampshire and keep people here. Finally, education. We need to keep our graduates here. What I would like to see is right now New Hampshire has an in-state tuition where you get a discount if you lived here before you go to college. I'd like to extend that to keep you here after you go to college, some form of tuition reimbursement. So I think those are the best ways that we can make New Hampshire the best state for people to live in and bring businesses here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So the second question will be by Andy Seal, who is the chairman of the Milford Republican Committee. Andy.
Great. Thank you, Ray. My question is, what free market idea do you have to reduce health insurance costs, and how would you implement it?
And Dan Dwyer is the first one to answer, please.
One more time, a free market idea? Okay, it doesn't, unfortunately, insurance is such a regulated industry, and it's a law-making policy change. The only way we can have a free market idea as it comes to insurance is we have to have lawmakers in Concord create legislation that writes such a law that is attractive to insurances to come back. We obviously know how to write legislation to get rid of them, so we now have to go back to those rooms, back to those conferences, and make it attractive. I can't come up for the next 20 minutes and give you all those ideas. There's just a little too many, and it is a complicated field, but it should be more of an openness, and it can be done. And the simple fact is, if you drove them away, there's a way to bring them back. The fact that cities and towns have such high property taxes, and I said this at council meetings, as when you're a town councilor, as Gary knows, you really get to have that homework and experience that most people don't have. The fact is, when cops and firemen, and God knows we love them and we need them, but when municipal employees are costing you $100,000 a piece, there's something wrong. It's one thing to say that their pay is somewhere between $60,000 or $70,000, but then you have to add on a $30,000 insurance plan. It's killing us. And what's going to kill us again is the Obamacare Cadillac tax that every town and city in New Hampshire is going to have to pony up. This town alone, and within less than 2 years, is going to have to come up with $500,000 added to our budget. How did I come up with that number? We have 248 employees, not counting teachers, so it's worse on the school side. This is just the town side. 248 times $3,000. What's $3,000? $3,000 over $27,000. That is the Obama law. Anybody on a Cadillac plan, if your plan costs more than $27,000, you're going to get a $3,000 fine. $3,000 fine times 248 people is over $700,000. The good news is they're only going to fine you 40% of that amount. So that's the good news. So instead of $744,000, you're going to pay $480,000. Every city in town is up against this in the next 24 months. That's how you tackle your the phrase
Free market idea.
Free market idea.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Try to have some free market, in other words.
That's you have to, but it starts with guys like us. It starts with the people who you pick to put up in Concord. It really matters who you choose. And if you don't have someone who knows the talk and can verbalize it to his other colleagues in the room, even Democrats, you don't stand a chance. You have to be able to know the lingo and explain it to somebody and be a good salesman on it with common sense ideas to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Maureen?
Thank you for the question. 2 ideas immediately come to mind, and that is, of course, the repeal of what is commonly known as Obamacare, the American Affordable Health Act, AHA. And that, of course, is done on a federal level, but we on the state level can do what we can to not expand that program, to not make those who become reliant on the government for their health insurance and so forth. So what do we do on the other end of things? Provide a freedom of choice in terms of choosing the health insurance company or plan that's right for an individual, even if that plan is across a state border or to the north or the south or what have you. 2 very important things. And this subject with regards to health care comes up all the time as I'm going door to door in the 4 towns here in District 11. It's on the minds of everybody, whether they work for large companies, whether they work for themselves in their own small businesses, or whether they're unemployed. Health insurance is always first and foremost. So those are my 2 thoughts on the subject.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. I also oppose Obamacare, and what I'm really upset at is the New Hampshire-led Senate last term passed Medicaid expansion. That was optional Obamacare that states could opt out or opt in. We decided to opt in. It's going to cost us money. I think it's going to lead to an income tax or sales tax because, frankly, the federal government is not going to keep up their end of it and fund it 100%. Even if they did, it's encouraging people to go on Medicaid that otherwise wouldn't. It's making people work less. I think that's a problem. We want to get people off Medicaid. We want prosperous people. I think we should also we need to look at removing the monopoly. Right now, there's one provider. If you're an individual plan seeking insurance, you get Anthem. There's no reason for Anthem to lower their prices. They have a monopoly on the market. We need to bring in more insurance companies and let people shop from out-of-state insurance. There's no reason not to. I can't see why anyone is against competition except for that. insurance provider. But besides them, I can't see why the people are against that sort of competition. I think we need transparency in pricing. I saw a study recently that blood tests ranged from anywhere to $10 up to over $1,000 for the same exact blood test. We need to see how this money is being spent. Profits for hospitals, they're at an all-time high. They're overcharging. I think this is leading to incredibly high health insurance that is just unacceptable. And I think those are three broad areas of how we can look at helping to reduce the healthcare problem.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Gary?
Thank you. I think we all agree that the Affordable Care Act is not working. And therefore, what we need to do is to develop a state solution that's going to meet the needs, the medical needs of the people. The legislature should first form a select committee, that is a committee of both House members and Senate, that will work to develop that New Hampshire solution. It's already been mentioned that we need to bring competition in the state. That will help to drive the cost down. That goes back to the first question we were asked today about the jobs in the economy. We need to introduce health savings accounts into the medical arena. Those will offer the incentives for people to not use emergency rooms to get an aspirin or for minor things. We need to enable the interstate purchasing of health policies across state lines throughout the country. We also need to set up the medical care so that people can choose the services they want, kind of like a medical care a la carte type thing. Obviously, the way it is now with the Affordable Care Act, I mean, if I'm on that as a male, I'm paying for pregnancy. I probably don't need that. So if we have the ability to go out and choose those elements of our health care that we wish to have, then perhaps the incentives will be there also to keep ourselves healthy, and that'll assist in driving costs down.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. And we'll shift on to our next panelist, Frank Edelblut.
Okay, thank you. So the cost of primary and secondary education is increasing every year, yet the educational outcomes are flat or going down. We talk about local control of schools, but the scope of federal and state mandates is so extensive that assertions of local control are almost misleading at this point. To fund all of this, our property taxes continue to rise, and we're literally driving people on fixed income out of the state. So how do we address this impending clash between increasing property taxes and the increasing cost of education?
Maureen, you're first.
Thank you once again. Good question, again on the minds of voters for sure. Well, one way to go about any kind of overspending or spending that is out of control and is driving up the cost of living is less spending. I think that a full audit should be made of what's going on in our school districts, our own Department of Education here in the state, and figure out where the costs are that can be eliminated or perhaps farmed out on the local level, if it's on the state, to the local levels, so that we don't duplicate roles or have more hires than we need to and so forth. So that is a big part of getting costs down for sure. Also, you mentioned mandates, very important. If mandates are unfunded, if mandates are being thrust upon the local level, that has to be addressed. And that's something for both those on the state level and in the federal level have to address in order to keep costs down.
Dan.
Thank you. I think we can agree just pouring money into education blindly is not a solution. We need to look at how that money is being spent. Frankly, I don't think we have a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. We need to, I'm in favor of choice when it comes to education. I oppose Common Core completely. It's a federal mandate coming in telling us how to teach. I think education needs to stay at the local level for high school and below. Teachers, parents, and students, they know best what will work for that individual child. I support whether you want to homeschool, public school, private school, charter school. You know what's best for you. I think we need to look at expanding the base of what sort of education you can get and choose what will work best for you. I think we need to look at more efficient spending of our money. Technology has come a long way over the years. I think schools can combine certain things, such as using online programs. For example, if your high school doesn't have enough children or students who want to learn something such as Japanese or anything like that, pool with a different school and teach it on a seminar, webinar, and I think you can accomplish the same things. So I think there's a lot of different things that can come into play. I think we can also look at increasing revenue through things like gaming. Right now, the lottery, a lot of that goes to education. So I'd be in favor of at least looking at gaming to see if that would be a viable source of income for education. And on the higher education level, we certainly need to reduce the tuition costs by auditing and seeing why some professors are making $100,000 teaching a couple classes. So there is a lot going into it. Thank you.
Lot there. Gary.
Thank you. As a selectman, I get asked this question quite a bit, but I think the viewers need to understand that the vast majority of what they pay in property taxes, they vote on directly within their towns. And if you don't go out to the meetings and vote, then you're giving that away. Personally, I don't really want the state to take over the local level education that I'm already in control of. And to that respect, that part that the state does control, I would just as soon see devolved to the local government because I think they can do it better. There are some things at the state level that we can do. One of them, step out of the way. Secondly, to address the remedial courses that college students, students entering college are required to take because they're not prepared. So we need to, I think maybe let the local levels kind of take control of this, give some guidance, use the technology that we have. I mean, in 1995, I put in a bill that established the Distance Learning Commission in New Hampshire. That set the stage for online education in the state. And I think we have seen how that has grown since. Money should follow the student. You know, if we're going to give aid to the schools, then let the money follow the student. Let the technology drive the student's need, and let's better prepare the students to enter the college at the level that they're supposed to. Thank you.
Dan.
This is one of the most depressing subjects that there is to talk about. I'm a realist, so if I sound like a downer, I've got to be me, as the line says. There's battles and then there's wars, and this war has been lost. Common Core isn't coming. Common Core is here. If you know about Common Core, and many of you do who pay attention to the rules out there, it already exists, number one. The second, realistic change would have to come from the very top, which means Washington and the Department of Education would have to be disbanded. I don't believe anybody thinks that's going to happen the next 2 years or 4 years. You can't keep taking the crack money from Washington and expect it to change. It just won't. And why does that sound radical? It doesn't sound radical to Republicans, but we're not in a red state anymore. We're controlled by a blue state. And we need to have our own schools funded by our own self. We're only 1.3 million people. God, you know, the joke is, you know, try to run California. What a joke. How do you run 35, 38 million people? But this is a country club state. We are 1.3 million people. We should be able to handle this ourselves. And until we stop taking the money from Washington, don't expect any change. It comes with restrictions. You take the money, then you play by their rules. That's just the way it goes. Back to UNH, $27,000 a year to send your kid to an in-state college. It can't be 27 down to 26.5 or 25.9. It's got to go back down to 19 or 20,000 a year. And you got to be the Dave Ramsey of economics and sell your kid. Make sure you go to a community college first for 2 years. You got to set up your kid for success, not failure. Not setting up a 22-year-old kid who's supposed to be our best and brightest in industry and in owning a home and set him up at 22 years old owing $100,000. That's a trouble, a lot of trouble. And we need more time. Thank you.
Did you want to add a little more onto that? We're trying to keep the 2 minutes as a target, okay? Anyway, next question will come from Mark Vincent. Mark, please.
Thank you very much, Ray. We had a discussion earlier about ways that we could make New Hampshire friendlier to businesses and bring more jobs into the state. We talked about taxes, we talked about regulations. But one of the biggest deterrents to businesses starting here, moving here, and expanding here is our high energy costs. So my question to you is, what would be your plan to reduce the cost of electricity in this state?
Okay, thank you. Dan Hines will be first for this question.
Thank you. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the free market. So I'm in favor of the free market. I think there's obviously a need for it. Why are those companies not here? I think it has to do with regulation. So, and also, again, going back on that high taxes. There's a need for affordable energy. Companies need to come in and provide it to us. So I don't think there's a silver bullet, just one answer to that. I think it's a lot of things. We need to look at the taxes and overall why businesses aren't moving here. But certainly there is a need for more affordable energy. And if the government is going to get involved in providing that, it's, I need to see it done. I want accountability and I want efficiency. I just don't want the government taking over all of the energy. That's the opposite of what I want. I want a smaller government. So certainly the government can have a role. I think their role should be not regulating so that people cannot put energy where they want and bring in different forms. So we certainly need to look at a lot of different options. I'd be happy to look at all those options. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Gary.
Thank you. I think we're seeing some of that right now in southern New Hampshire. From what I want to understand, that New Hampshire could use an influx of natural gas to help offset the electricity. The problem we're seeing, and I represent Hollis, and Hollis is going through an issue right now where the Tennessee pipeline, gas pipeline, wants to put a pipeline right across Hollis, but it goes through Beaver Brook, the conservation, cuts in people's backyards, right close to their garages, and the fear right now is that somebody in Washington is going to make an eminent domain decision, and they'd never have set foot in New Hampshire before. So there are alternate routes. I'm certainly willing to look at natural gas as an alternate route along particularly rights of way or utility corridors, but I get really concerned when the route wants to get through, and actually the target is in southern Merrimack, so it does also cut through part of Amherst and Milford. So I've kind of got all those together, but I don't like to see federal government using eminent domain in cases where it's not justified, which in my opinion right now it's not, because there aren't additional customers at the end to justify the need for this. Also, that I think people's private property rights need to be taken into consideration anytime that we're laying down these corridors. We may need the natural gas, and particularly for the winter in southern New Hampshire, but it needs to be done in a way that people's property rights are also balanced.
Thank you, Gary. Dan.
This is another issue that rears its ugly head of madness again. We have the highest electrical rates, and the lack of leadership here is just appalling, and a lack of the legislature of taking some common sense action. Why, for instance, 4 years ago when the Northern Pass project was first reared its ugly head, why didn't the leadership or governor and everybody say, of course we want you to come, but of course you will bury it. Of course you're not going to scar our landscape with power lines that are 80 or 100 feet tall, but that people don't verbalize the common sense nature of it. And of course, Gary, we should not be going through people's backyards. We have corridors throughout our state already. They're called highways. Why can't we have corridors along our highways and where these people want to go? We seem to always fight the most common sense thing, where you have a company like Kinder Morgan that wants to come here with a potential of millions and millions of dollars that would help lower our state by obviously having a terminal. I don't know if you've read about the future plan of some of their plans is, but for some rough numbers, if they're paying $4 a gallon for natural gas here in New England, but in Europe they're paying $18 a gallon. What do you think Kinder Morgan wants New England for? Because New England is the least productive pipeline. We have the least amount of pipelines in the whole country. We're very undeveloped. But why do they want to come to New England? Because they want to have terminals that can go on ships and sell it to Europe. There's millions to billions of dollars to be sold across the ocean, but they need terminals here. But we can't have a terminal unless you have the infrastructure. The infrastructure should be worked with leadership, but we have been completely lacking with leadership on this. But here we're talking 20 years about New Hampshire having the most expensive rates, and I've seen no change because I don't see the conversation as I'm placing it, and I talked to a few others. I seem to be a voice in the wilderness. I seem to be the only person who I hear my own self say, why can't you do this? Instead, we put windmills on top of mountains, which maybe can light up 40 homes. It's mind-boggling how they can justify windmills that will literally only do hundreds of homes, not thousands of homes, hundreds. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I plan to apply a 5-point test to every piece of legislation that comes before me in the New Hampshire State Senate. And this ties into electricity, don't worry, the costs of electricity. But it's important to know, the first piece is, what does the bill cost? The second is, does the bill raise any taxes or fees? The third is, what is the long-term effect of the bill? Fifth is, does the bill encumber any individual rights and liberties? And fifth is, does the bill expand government? You wonder, how many times have bills related to energy, cost of electricity, and so forth were put against such a 5-point test? I doubt ever. That's part of my plan, is to do that. Similar to business, and when you prefaced the question, you mentioned attracting business to the state. Similar to business regulations and the like, there should be a similar committee in the Senate, started in the Senate, to review all regulations, licensing, and costs related to energy. See what can be repealed, see what can be enhanced, see what's going on in that regard. A thorough overview, much like there was in the Bill O'Brien administration with regards to business. Those are my 2 thoughts on the subject. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've gone through one round of questions already. Things seem to be working. And the 2-minute is a target. Let's leave that. But if you move on, nobody's going to stop. So why don't we go back and start again with Chris? Chris, would you give us the next question?
Great, thank you. One of the biggest problems we have, I think, in government, if people pay attention to it, is transparency. It comes up in, a lot of people really get irritated when they hear about, well, how did this bill pass? Well, I didn't know this thing passed at all, or I didn't hear about this. And so what I want to ask all of you today is, if a bill were to come before the state Senate, okay, would you ask for a roll call on that bill as it moves forward?
And starting with Gary.
Thank you, Chris, for the question. And I totally agree with you. The transparency in the Senate has been lacking. It has been lacking since Executive Counselor Dave Wheeler was a state senator. I would follow his lead of way back then, and I have no problem. In fact, I like roll calls because it allows my constituents to see how I vote. So I would be pursuing many more roll calls in the Senate than what we currently see, so that there is some transparency there for the constituents to judge.
Dan.
Yeah, quick answer on that. I don't see any reason why roll call should not be 100% of the time. You're there. You want your constituents to know what you're doing. You should be proud of your stance on every issue when you're in Concord. If I was a senator, I would demand a roll call on everything. Whatever the bill was, whatever the question was, where do you stand, Mr. Dwyer? That's where you should answer. I don't, for the life of me, but that's that nasty game up there. And, sometimes you need to elect some people that don't want to play that game and get some new blood up there and get the game changed. And that's what I would do.
Thank you. Maureen.
Thank you. With regards to the roll call, yes, I would definitely be in favor of having multiple roll calls, whatever it took, on bills. It's very important. Transparency is very big with me. You'll notice that on my website, votemooney.com. The issues section is as thorough as it can possibly be. It's in multiple sections related to not only the overview of how I feel on the issues, but how I feel on issues related to our party's platform, and even how I feel on issues that were taken up by this past Senate. I have on my site various bills that this past Senate voted on, and I state how I would have voted were I a senator and these bills came up. But with transparency comes something else that's very big with me, and that's communication. I believe that with the website, with email newsletters and things of that nature, it's important not only for constituents to know on how you voted, but why you voted that way, and what's coming up in the horizon to vote on next week and the week after that. It's important that the Senate calendar be published on the next state senator's website. It's important that the state senator be out and about in the 4 towns in this district to take in input from people who are interested in the issues related to the state. Very similar to what I did on the platform committee when I traveled all 10 counties and took in input on how to write that document. I'd be very big to get input from constituents as well. So transparency, it's a broad overview, but it doesn't stop there. It branches down into multiple categories, of which I've been talking about in my own state Senate campaign. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Maureen. Dan?
Thank you. Transparency and accountability, I think, go together. So roll call, there's no reason not to. It's just hiding votes. I want to know how my senator is voting. Frankly, there's a lot of things I'm disappointed with because I know how they vote. I'm sure there's a lot of things I hate that I don't know about that they're doing to me. So yes, I would also like to see ahead of time posted so that people can call their senator. After all, we're there for them. We're for our district. We're supposed to be voting how they want. So I would love to know how people want ahead of time, what their issues are. And yes, I think it's transparency and accountability are definitely important and certainly lacking in the present administration. Thank you.
Well, I think we have violent agreement on that one issue of roll call votes, and I think that it is very important, the whole issue of transparency, which filters down right from Washington. The idea of voting on things you haven't had a chance to read is just fundamentally wrong for a functioning constitutional republic. But that's my 2 cents, and I'm just the moderator here, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Andy, it's yours.
Great, thank you. We've briefly touched on this topic, and I'd actually like to hear a little bit more on this. New Hampshire's population is graying. We're getting older. Families are moving out. Young folks are moving out. How would you reverse that trend?
Dan, you're first.
I don't know if it can. I really don't know if it can. Part of the transparency, I'll piggyback into that question, is we're living a very scary time right now when the National Telegraph fires its political reporter and announces that they're no longer going to cover politics in Concord. The Union Leader used to have 3 or 4 reporters covering Concord. They're down to 1. This is some scary times for New Hampshire. We can read about the dying of the newspaper, but we're living in a world as of 2014 right now that a major newspaper in southern New Hampshire has decided not to cover politics. I ask you, if the papers aren't going to tell you what's going on, how can the senators and the legislatures have roll call votes and actually be recorded? Are we all to be expected to be bloggers? I'll volunteer for that. I don't have a problem with it. Do you want your senators and your legislators to become reporters? I guess I'll raise my hand for that too, because it seems to me that's going to be the only way that you're going to get your message or the news out to the voters. The graying of New Hampshire, I think that ball has already been placed. I'm not sure what to do to bring that back. If you don't lower tuition costs, the kids are picking out-of-state schools because it's cheaper. If you don't right to work, if you don't pass right to work, you're not going to get a car company or somebody else that's going to want to come. And right to work is a tricky vote. If it only wins by 1 or 2 votes and we keep playing this pendulum politics between Republicans and Democrats, you're not going to get a major company to come in because every 2 years there's a switch and that piece of legislation won by 2 votes. Hard-pressed to find a Honda or a Toyota that wants to come to New Hampshire knowing that billions being spent in here could be changed over. We're really tough times right now. Very tough times. And unless you can put and speak about those signposts that are in the road, I don't know. I really don't. It's a very hard and difficult question to answer.
Thank you, Dan. Maureen?
Thank you. The question becomes, how do we get college graduates to stay in New Hampshire and start their families, start their businesses, start their careers here? And that branches out into the question of jobs and the economy and attracting business, which we talked about earlier. Having sponsored the Right to Work bill, I know that that's a great way to start. Getting rid of regulation, that's another great way to start. But if you go further down the chain, we have college tuition that's out of control. And it's hard to counteract that with a federal Department of Education that holds on very tightly with accreditation standards, of which I'm intimately familiar. I served as the Associate Dean of an alternative, affordable, and quality educational undergraduate institution that was meant for people to finish their degrees who couldn't necessarily afford the big tuitions that are out there right now. But that has to be addressed, and perhaps with the State Department of Education, we can work something there. But right there, that's very important. Another thing that's interesting in order to keep our populace, our young populace, from leaving the state is you wonder what kind of programs are being taught in our community colleges and our state colleges. I was at a BIA meeting fairly recently in Milford, and multiple business members and owners were there. And one of their biggest concerns in New Hampshire is that they have jobs, but they don't have qualified and educated workforce out there enough to fill those jobs exactly. That really struck a chord with me. I think that perhaps a review of what's being offered and how we can fill those jobs and what courses and majors we offer here in New Hampshire is a good way to start in order to fill jobs that are already available but hard to fill due to various qualifications that are missing in applicants. So there are multiple thoughts on that. Just for the record, I am one that came to college in Merrimack, New Hampshire, and never left. So there is hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan?
Thank you. I think it comes down to three things: education, jobs in the economy, and property taxes. As a lot of people said, we need to keep our college students here. They are leaving to go to states where the tuition is cheaper, or if they graduate here with $100,000 in debt from a public school, that is unacceptable. I graduated from a community college in upstate New York, and the tuition there was approximately $2,000 a semester. When I was done with community college, I didn't have any debt. I then went on to a four-year school, graduated with minimal debt. The tuition, it's outrageous, it's unacceptable. Once we get jobs, again through lowering taxes, it will allow our college graduates to stay here. New Hampshire is the best place to live in the country. There's no reason that I could see that any graduate would want to leave this state unless they're leaving to find a job. We need to address that. And finally, for people who retire here, like I said, they lived here their whole life, and now they're being forced to move out because the property taxes are out of control, in part due to health care out of control. So I think this is a combination of different things we need to look at to deal with the different classes of people and why they're leaving. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Gary?
Thank you. For 18 years, I've been fighting to try to keep business in New Hampshire so that we can establish for the residents a good place to live and work. And, you know, I've had the privilege over the last few months to hit different places with, Attorney Mooney, Attorney Hines, and Councilor Dwyer. But, you know, there's a vast difference in telling somebody what you're going to do and then pushing the button and doing it. For instance, there were 2 instances of minimum wage that Mr. Dwyer did not vote on. Attorney Mooney voted twice to increase the minimum wage. One of those would have increased county expenses over $45,000 and local expenses over $500,000. We need to have people in Concord that are going to be serious about fixing the problem and not just give lip service. We want people who are going to be pro-business, that are going to look and say, we want to help these businesses. We don't want them to be on their backs. We want them to stay. We want them to grow. We want them to supply the jobs that the students coming out of colleges are going to be able to go into. I was on the Workforce Opportunity Council for a year. That was exactly what we were trying to focus on. Unfortunately, that still hasn't come to fruition as much as it should. It's someplace that we need to focus, but we can only do that if we have pro-business minded legislators there. Thank you.
Any comments back?
A quick comment. If you're going to recall my record, I would have been fair to say it was in 1984 when I was 20 years old as a state representative from Manchester. So I don't remember 84 very well after all this time, but fair is fair.
Maureen?
Well, Ray, I came to this forum to talk about the issues, and that was my understanding attending the forum, not to go after one another, and I'm going to stick to that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to the next question, which is from Frank Edelbelt. Frank?
Okay, I'm going to change up the conversation a little bit. New Hampshire has the 9th highest incident of Lyme disease in the country. Hillsborough County is the 2nd highest in the state. The passage of the laws that was mentioned earlier, protecting doctors prescribing long-term antibiotics was a helpful start. But Lyme has become the 2nd most commonly reported infectious disease in New England. Yet, there remains a reluctance, it seems, to directly face the issue because of conflicting contingency groups. So how will you bring together the medical community and the Lyme patient advocacy groups to work together on this growing and looming medical issue for our local communities?
Maureen?
Thank you very much for the question, because it is an important one. I have members of my family that suffer from Lyme disease. And I'll tell you something, when I say suffer, I mean just that. It's incredible what they have to undergo, how it affects their lifestyles, their livelihood, their energy level. It just goes on and on. Huge issue to me personally. How do we get a discussion going is essentially the question, as I understand it. And that's very important, and one thing that a state senator can certainly facilitate by having roundtables and discussing what needs to be done with victims themselves in order to what needs to be pursued in Concord. I'm all for trying multiple serums or medications that haven't been tried before and so forth, and getting a full steam ahead approval on that, and that's very important. So there's a lot to be done in that subject. I have to say, since I was in the legislature, it's been amazing to see how that issue has grown, unfortunately, and how it is affecting so many. And so I would at first see what has been done, and then what we can do to alleviate some pain and to certainly start some discussions. Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you. I'm certainly not an expert in this area. I've never held political office before, so I'm not a politician. I don't have ties to lobbyists, so I can answer that part of the question. I'm not just going to vote for whoever gives me the most money. I want to hear both sides of the issues, bring in people, and hear what the growing consensus is. I think my general answer would be this sounds like a great opportunity for a free market. There's certainly a problem, and I expect there's a lot of good solutions out there, and I would be happy to look at all of those things to see what I believe would be the best course of action to take. Thank you.
Gary?
Thank you. For 2 years, I fought to get a Lyme disease bill passed that would bring relief to those chronic Lyme disease victims. The issue is really much, much deeper than the surface talk. I have met with Dr. Montero. I've been on close-up with Dr. Montero. The primary problem right now is that there are 2 standards for the treatment of Lyme disease. There's Associated Disease Society of America and the International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society. The IDSA basically says there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease, that all Lyme is treated within 8 to 12 weeks. ILADS says that no, there is such a thing as chronic Lyme disease, and it may be treatable with long-term antibiotics. Now, one thing we were able to accomplish is when we had the public hearing on the Lyme bill, we had over 200 people that filled that room, and there was not a legislator that could walk out of there saying that there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. I've been trying to give this a lot of thought because I really want to push the issue forward. There's a lot of education going on. The primary problem right now is the Department of Health and Human Services will not put a link to ILADS on their website. They have a link to IDSA, which the CDC recognizes. But I think one of the things that we should be able to do is to go forward without a whole lot of controversy and say that nurses, school nurses, in their annual education credits should have maybe a couple hours of Lyme disease education to help identify it and move the treatment along. So it's a really tough nut to crack, but we continue to talk. I was on the subcommittee for the last couple of years doing just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Dan?
Again, I have a different approach, and the approach is personal. I was just in my doctor's office in Nashua because 2 months ago, I pulled a tick out of the back of my armpit right around this area, and was lucky enough to catch it in the morning. But I've had a routine now for several years because I live in the woods. I live on 10 acres, so I've got trees around. And as most people in New Hampshire, unless you live really inner city, the ticks aren't such a problem. But if you live in the woods, even if 1 acre or 2 acres, you're probably exposed to some ticks. So my answer to your question would be this. We would have to take a national approach, or at least a state approach, because we're only going to talk about New Hampshire. We take a state approach as they did with breast cancer awareness and women self-examining themselves. Me and my wife are now in the habit of every night checking ourselves, stripping down, and you have to physically look at your body. You have to find this tick. We find them all the time. I just pulled off 2 off me yesterday out for a hike in the woods. 2 of them were crawling up on my pant leg. If you live in the woods or if you go hiking in the mountains, we need to have a self-examination educational front. The only way you're going to be able to stop Lyme disease is to stop it from getting it. We know how you get it. You get it by getting bit. So every night, start teaching in the schools, body awareness, one person checking your hair, you got to check yourself, because it's been 15 years or more. I've been physically taking ticks off myself, and sometimes you miss. If you choose that, if that's the night you forget to check, that's the one you're pulling out of the skin. Sometimes they pull out real easy because they didn't have a chance to burrow yet, but I've had one that was in there deep. And luckily, knock on wood, I had got tested and didn't have the Lyme disease, went on a 6-week antibiotic thing. But self-examination is the answer to stopping it from spreading. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our next question, we'll go to Mark Vincent. Mark?
Thank you, Ray. Earlier this year, our legislature made the fateful decision to expand Obamacare here in New Hampshire by expanding Medicaid. And as a result of that, we could be looking at upwards of 50,000 or more additional Granite Staters being enrolled in this program. It's also very likely that within a few short years, the federal funding for this program is going to begin to decrease. So my question to you is this. What happens when that federal funding is cut and the cost falls on the taxpayers of this state? What is your plan to mitigate the impact of this additional cost?
We'll start with Dan.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Andy Sanborn. He did a great job opposing Medicaid expansion. Unfortunately, he did not get enough Republicans to go on his side. I'm absolutely shocked that the Republicans passed the Medicaid expansion. Like I said, we have a majority in the Senate. Why we conceded that to the Democrats, simply unacceptable. They made some concessions, and they got, I guess, the best they could do. Really, the best they could do is all voted no and stuck together. We wouldn't have this problem. The federal government, it's the false fallacy of free federal money. The federal government has a terrible track record of providing the money that they promise to the states. It'd be nice if they give it 100% funding like they say. Still, I would have opposed it anyway. But yeah, I don't think the money's going to keep coming in as it's promised. If it doesn't, there's 2 options. We're either going to need a sales tax or an income tax, which I don't want either, to pay for this stupid thing, or we need to repeal it. So one of the redeeming things in the bill is that it's my understanding there's a sunset clause in it. However, it's going to take tough legislatures up there to allow it to sunset. There's a lot of lobbyists who are up there and going to say, hey, these people have health care. No one wants to see people without health care. But Obamacare, it's a mess. The Medicaid expansion, it was unacceptable. So if it comes up to sunset, I will oppose it, and I will vote against the Medicaid expansion being renewed. And I guess I could just pray in the meantime the federal government finally keeps their word and pray, continues to pay for it. But it's definitely a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you. I believe we need to dismantle Obamacare one piece at a time or all at once. It is imperative that this next legislature get started on this issue that you're talking about that will happen in 2017, because if you wait for another term, it's too late. I'm going to go back to the suggestion I had before that we need to establish a select committee to look at these issues and to put in place a New Hampshire plan and to advertise that plan to its citizens so that they know when 2017 comes and the federal government stops its funding of this, that things are going to change. But we want something in place that is going to be acceptable and meet the needs of the people. One has to wonder if that's why we ended up with Obamacare, is because the system that was in place before did not meet the needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
An utter disaster, and very quite frankly shocked for Senator Morse, who's normally a level-headed guy, ends up passing a disaster. And make no mistake about it, it's not about if the federal government, it's already in writing. They will not pay for it all indefinitely. The writing is either 2 years or 3 years, so it's not a secret. Right. The federal government will stop its contribution. So we took this program on knowing that. Again, passing legislation without knowing the financial cost of anything should be criminal. It's criminal in my personal eyes. How do we stop it? My personal belief is the fate of Obamacare is going to self-destruct through many different battles. The one battle that's going to come up is already the mandate of everybody being forced. They've now, as you probably read in the paper, they've come out with 5 different excuses on why you don't have to buy it. That type of law itself will see the system just start to implode. If there's ways out for people not to pay, the system won't survive. And in New Hampshire, I'm going to go back to being manageable. We're 1.3 million people thinking outside the box, which I've thought before. We should be bringing in doctors, whether it takes hundreds of doctors to come in to work under New Hampshire. You give them a deal, but we'll pay off your student loans if you come and work for 2 or 3 years. There's many different ways that New Hampshire can manage itself without the need of leaning on Washington for the nickels and dimes that they want to bestow on us through the healthcare system.
Thank you, Dan. Maureen?
Thank you. I go back to my 5-point plan that I will put up against any piece of legislation that comes on my state Senate desk. And the expansion of Medicaid violates 3 pretty grossly. Number 1, what does the bill cost? Did anybody really think of the ramifications of that? Number 3, because I'm going around here. Number 3, what is the long-term effect of the bill? And we all know what this Medicaid expansion is leading towards, and that's a broad-based tax. And then number 5 on my 5-point plan, does it expand government? That Medicaid bill, yes, garnered support from both parties, unfortunately, fails very badly on those 3 big points of my 5-point plan. Too bad every legislator up there didn't have those 5 points prior to voting on that bill, or we wouldn't have this mess today. So yes, I would work to repeal it, but even more so, and here comes an interesting point that not many people on the campaign trail talk about. They talk about, indeed, what they're for, what they're in favor for, what they'll do. But we need to, too, have discussions about what we're against. And I am very much against a sales or an income tax. So those are not options in order to clean up what is an impending disaster that this last state Senate left us. Thank you.
And thank you, Maureen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, time has been going by, so we've gotten pretty much most of the questions out of the way, and we're running out of the time. I want to insert one thing before we ask our candidates to sum up. And I'll start, Gary, and move on down. Can you just briefly give us contact information for your campaign, website, or whatever, for people who want to get with you and get further more information? I'll just go through that, and then we'll do candidate summaries.
You can find my information on www.garydaniels.org. Also on Facebook and Twitter.
On Facebook, Dan Dwyer for State Senate, and my phone number is 603-440-5013.
Thank you, Ray. My campaign website, which includes where I stand on the issues, my steering committee of those who have endorsed me publicly in District 11, as well as all my contact information, is votemooney.com, VOTEMOONEY. I also post a weekly campaign message on the site. My phone number is 603-578-4890. Email votemooney@yahoo. And Twitter is @Maureen C. Mooney. That's it for Twitter, and I am also on Facebook as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. My campaign website is hines4nh.com. It's HYNES, number 4nh.com. Facebook is facebook.com/hines4nh. You can email me at dan@hines4nh.com. And finally, if you want to give me a call, it's 603-583-4442. Thank you.
Good. So our viewers know how to get hold of you. Was your microphone
Yeah,
off
my
at the time?
microphone was off. I almost made it through. My website, where all the information can be found, is www.garydaniels.org.
Okay. Well, want to thank everybody for coming here. We're going to wrap up with summaries by each of the candidates, but before we do that, I want to thank our panelists, Chris Buda, Andy Seal, Frank Edelblut, and Mark Vincent. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and effort in coordinating this and pulling together those excellent questions, which were very, very good. So what I propose we do is we'll go in the order that we drew and give each of our candidates the opportunity to spend 3 minutes or so and tell the voters why they should be considering you on September 9th and on November 4th. So we'll start, Dan, you were first in the order, so Dan Dwyer goes first.
I won't take 2 minutes or 3 minutes because I think my answers to the questions kind of let people understand where I'm coming from. And again, thank you. I have to say, and nobody's, all four of you are potential voters, but your questions are great. I mean, they were. Those questions reflect the most important issues that's affecting New Hampshire, and I really appreciate the forum that we have here to get the word out. But I'm troubled. I'm running because I've used the word depressed, and people say, oh, you got to be rah-rah and upbeat. But I feel that this is depressing times. I'm old enough, at 51 years old, to see Ronald Reagan sweep 48 states across America. And, that word malaise, the Jimmy Carter history, the word malaise, anger 30 years ago got people to the polls. I'm telling you right now, folks, I'm very depressed about what I'm feeling out in the streets in New Hampshire right now. Anger now is equaling dropout. People are not, you mark my word, come election day, we're not going to like the numbers that are at the polls. I don't have an answer how to change that other than our party working harder to recruit more members. I think that's what we're lacking drastically, was we're not recruiting enough people into the Republican Party. But I don't like what's happening in New Hampshire. The anger in people that are feeling today is not motivating them to go to the polls because they view all politicians as being somehow corrupt and not knowing the issues that are affecting them or being able to have the ability to change it. So I'm offering that as a way to, if you vote for me, I hope that you'll get the sense that I'm going up there working for you. I'm not beholden to any interest. Haven't accepted any campaign financing from anybody. I'm doing it on the cheap, to be honest with you. It's a $100 a year job, and that's how I'm treating it. I shouldn't be taking checks from somebody for thousands of dollars for a volunteer job in New Hampshire. So consider that on September 9th. And again, my name is Dan Dwyer, and I ask you for your support. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Next in the order is Gary Daniels. Gary.
Thank you, Ray. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential of others. Together, we stand at a crossroad, and we have to decide whether we're going to go forward as pioneers of the future or prisoners of the past. My 18-year legislative voting record will reflect the path of a pioneer, including the introduction of bills such as the Distance Learning Commission, which set the stage for online education in New Hampshire, a bill that prohibited the use of Social Security numbers to protect you from ID theft, a Lyme disease bill that enabled Lyme disease victims to get the long-term antibiotic care that they needed here in state rather than having to travel out of state. My vision of hope and prosperity includes working with you to find those solutions that will unlock the potential of all businesses and citizens in New Hampshire. I therefore ask for your vote for State Senate on September 9th. My website again is www.garydaniels.org. I invite you to go there, look at it, go to newhampshire.gov, and look at my voting records. They have been consistent. And finally, I'd like to thank the moderator and the town chairs for putting this forum on tonight. and I wish you all peace and prosperity.
Thank you very much. Maureen, you're next. Make sure your microphone is on.
Oh, it looks like it was on the whole time, so
Good.
that's good. I'm ready to go. Thank you very much. Ray, thank you for moderating. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your thoughtful questions, very important. And thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you're still tuned in at this point, obviously you care very deeply about issues that concern you, our community, and our state. I would humbly ask for your vote in the primary on September 9th for the State Senate. I hope by this time it comes across on TV that I care very much about this district and our state. I'm very passionate about the issues and constituent service. I stand before you as a candidate who's a conservative voice, who stands for limited government, less spending, lower taxes, and the enhancement of personal liberties and rights. I fully understand that the State Senate seat doesn't belong to me or anybody here. It belongs to all of us, all of the residents of District 11, and I am fully mindful of that upon being fortunate enough to be elected. I'm also mindful that the issues that come before me will be put against my 5-point test that can be found on votemooney.com to always keep the best interests of the residents of this district at the forefront of my mind. Again, I hope I am worthy enough to earn your vote. I'll be working very hard towards Election Day, and I hope to see you on the campaign trail. Feel free to contact me with any thoughts, questions, or comments you may have. Again, I take constituent service very serious, and I know that my job as a state senator doesn't just begin and end in Concord. It branches down into Merrimack, Amherst, Milford, and Wilton. Thank you again for your time and your consideration. Good night.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan.
And thank you for having the debate and having us all here. I've said before, I'm a small business owner for a smaller government. I think I've made it clear that I want to lower taxes and what my opinion on the economy is. But it's not just that. I want the government out of my wallet, and I want them out of my bedroom. The other half is social issues. I'm proud to recently have been endorsed by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. And my job, my primary source of income is I'm an attorney, and I do criminal defense and constitutional law. So on a daily basis, I'm defending the Constitution. I'm going to go up there, I'm going to defend the state constitution and the federal constitution. Frankly, there's two choices for just about everything. Either the government can make the choice or make the decision for you, or you can make that choice. I think it should be up to you to make the choice for what works best for you. And basically, if a bill is increasing taxes, I don't want it. And if it's decreasing liberty, I don't want it. So that's what I stand for. And if you stand for those things, I hope I can earn your support in the upcoming election. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Before we wrap up, I would like to ask of each of our panelists to give us contact information for the Republican committees in your towns. As I mentioned earlier, our panelists represent the Republican committees in the 4 towns that are comprising District 11. So if the voters want to go to those committees or reach out to those groups to help in the election, why don't we start off, Chris, with you, and let us know how to get hold of your organization.
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the Merrimack Republican Town Committee, and our website is www.merrimackgop.org. You can reach us on Facebook at Facebook/MerrimackGOP and Twitter/MerrimackGOP.
Andy.
Sure. The Milford GOP actually meets the 4th Saturday of the month at Chupanga's Restaurant. We meet at 9 o'clock. We have a website, www.milford-republicans.org, and we're also on Facebook.
So the Greater Wilton Republican Committee, which encompasses the towns of Greenville, Wilton, Lineborough, and Francistown, meets on the first Thursday of every month at the Masonic Lodge in downtown Wilton. If you have questions, you can reach me at 603-661-7730, and I hope you'll join us.
All right, I'm Mark Vincent. I'm the chairman of the Amherst Republican Town Committee. You can find all of our information and my contact information at www.amherstrepublicans.org. We're also on Twitter at AmherstGOP. You can also find us on Facebook at Amherst NH Republican Committee. Our meetings are held the first Saturday of every month. We meet for breakfast at Joey's Diner on Route 101A in Amherst at 8 a.m., and all Republicans and conservative-minded independents are welcome to join us.
Thank you, gentlemen. And for those who are interested, the Hillsborough County Republican Committee also has a website, which is www.hillsboroughgop.org. You can go there for information on our activities and things that are coming up. As I mentioned earlier, our purpose here is to give the voters the opportunity to get a feel for the people who will be on the ballot on September 9th. Voting and voting intelligently is the fundamentals of democracy. So our purpose here today is to give voters a chance to see what these potential candidates stand for. As I mentioned earlier, we're happy to have 4 excellent candidates on the Republican primary ballot on September 9th. So I would urge the voters to reach out to the candidates or the town committees if you want further information or to discuss with them further what their beliefs are and what they would do in representing you in Concord. Make your vote count, make it an informed vote, come out on September 9th and vote in the primary, and then put your efforts behind your candidate, the Republican candidate, in the general election. So I want to thank our panelists today. We want to thank our candidates and congratulate you on stepping up to represent the citizens of your district, and I wish you all the best. So we'll wrap this discussion up, and thank you very much to Merrimack Community Television. Have a good day.